with Sophia Melone.
Hello, everyone. I am Sophia Melone, the Debt Demolisher, here to bring you the tools, tips, and tricks to help you manage your financial baggage the right way. It is an honor, absolute privilege to be before you all for yet another live stream night right here on the Debt Demolisher TV as we're getting inside of our work for the Vet Your Spending Challenge. We are now on day 18 of the Vet Your Spending Challenge, which gives us an opportunity to still continue to build up on the things that we have been learning throughout this so far 17-day journey. So last night you had an opportunity to kind of work through some of the exercises and begin to look at updating your workbooks based on what we covered and looking at what those things will actually mean, not only to you, but also thinking about any additional costs that it will be or that will require for those who you're planning to give your gifts to. So with day 19 of the Vet Your Spending Challenge, no, we're on day 18. With day 18 of the Vet Your Spending Challenge, we're going to be continuing on the conversation around thinking about additional costs, but we're going to look at it from a different perspective, whereby we are thinking about buffers. So one thing that's important that I always find when it comes to your budgeting process is that, granted, we're going through this process of looking through all of our numbers, thinking of all of the additional costs, thinking of all of the things that may be needed or necessary in order to not only get this particular thing that we're planning to give, but thinking about the cost over time, just so that we can ensure that it's going to still be able to be used as a result of what you've given. So when you're looking at thinking of those costs, there could be instances whereby there may be one or two things that you may forget. It may be something that you probably didn't think of. And it may even be some conversations maybe around unexpected costs, price changes, or even taxes. But even when you think about sales tax and so forth, that could kind of be coincided with the what's the thing we were talking about yesterday? The cost, the added cost, thinking of all of the projected costs, because we know if we buy something, we have to pay for taxes and so forth. But with today, one thing that is important to do is think about how you can finalize your budgets by incorporating a buffer. So whenever I'm practicing my budgeting processes, one thing that I always incorporate inside of that is a buffer. And that's always the last step that I do inside of my budgeting process. So I could have whatever my estimate is or however I determine what my cost would be. Even though I could go through all of the details, I could find all of this information, I can think of as many things as I can, there could be instances whereby that number that you came up with just might not be enough. And oftentimes that happens when folks aren't thinking about changes that could happen within the prices or additional costs that might be unexpected. So when you add on a buffer, it's something that could help you with mitigating the risk of going over budget, because one of the things that we want to be able to kind of prevent is overspending during the holidays, but then making sure that we could get ourselves in a position where we are marking it to basically come in under budget, so that way you can work with your excess. So day 18 is going to provide you with the space to be able to identify what your contingency is going to be and how you're going to come up with your rule of thumb. So your rule of thumb does not have to be the same rule of thumb that I come up with. Your rule of thumb could be 5%, it could be 10%, it could be 15%, it could be 20, 25%, whatever percentage that you want to come up with. But it's really about making sure that you're including a large enough buffer so that way you won't run into an instance where you end up going over budget. So how is this going to play into what you're doing inside of the Vet Your Spending Challenge, and more specifically, how is this going to play inside of the workbooks that you have. So spoiler alert, you are going to get another workbook. That's just the way that this process runs. So another workbook will be coming out today that's going to allow you to be able to consider what your buffers will be. So you have the opportunity to identify what you want your buffers to be, whether it be 5, 10, 15, 20%. And then you could use that template to include a buffer for each line item on your list. So I'm gonna go ahead and show the growth work so that it's presented on the screen. And then I will also show you guys the updated template for those of you who are registered. So your growth work for day 18 is going to allow you to be able to determine what your personal rule of thumb is going to be, whether it be 5%, 15%, 20%, 25%, etc. If you want to go less than 10%, you can, but I always suggest a little bit more than that. So you always want to err on the side of caution by having a higher rule of thumb, because just because you have that higher budgeted amount, that doesn't mean that you have to expend to that capacity. It's just designed to help you cushion enough resources to plan for whatever it is that you're planning to give. And that way, you won't have to pull from a different bucket in order to pay for these holiday gifts. So you're going to use these percentages as a designation to help you develop your contingency buffer. And once you've determined what your contingency buffer percentage is going to be, you're going to calculate your actual contingency buffer amount for each item on your preliminary list, and you're going to add that amount to each line item in order for you to determine what your total budgeted amount will be per line item. So although we're going through the phase of getting towards the ending of our budgeting process, that doesn't mean that it's going to be set in stone or it's going to be final right now, because even though we're finalizing the budgets, there are still things that you can do, adjust, add, tweak in the coming days. But this is just designed to help you with making sure that you're setting aside enough depending on what you're planning to give and why you're planning to give it. So if you are registered, one of the things that you are going to be receiving as a part of registering is an updated workbook. So this workbook will contain your contingency buffers or the space to calculate it for yourself. So to make it so much easier for those who are registered, and you can use this form if this thing works for me today. Okay. All right, so when you get your first booklet, or when you get this booklet, day 18's booklet, you're going to get the instructions. It's going to have the same information. The added tabs will be, because remember we went over the life cycle cost yesterday, the added percentage piece is going to go here, where you're going to put in what your rule of thumb contingency percentage is. So let me just make sure my formula is right. Yeah, that's right. So if you want your buffer to be, let's say 25%, you're going to put 25% for that line item. Let me just use an example. I'm throwing them out in here. 700, and I said 105. I'm just going to make up a number here, and I'm going to say 10. And then my contingency buffer is 25%. So if you go through this example, you take each of your line items, you're going to go through taking it from your life cycle estimated cost. What the new cost would be, you're going to now add in your buffer. Your buffer will include what the new estimated cost is for each item within your life cycle cost. Multiply that by whatever your percentage is. If it's 5%, if it's 25%, if it's 10%, if it's 15%, all you have to do is just plug in the number, and then the final budgeted amount will calculate for you to tell you what that amount will be for that particular line item. So your job and your responsibility is just to assign each line item with a contingency buffer that you've decided of what it will be. And then you will have your final budgeted amount, which will show up here at the top, and it'll automatically calculate for you. There's also an additional tab that allows you to summarize the amounts by person. So there was a conversation that I had a little bit earlier on in some of the prior days where I explained how it's important to monitor like how much you're giving to one particular person. And based on what you're giving, you could look to see how much you're spending on one person in totality, and making, and even coming up with maybe the revelation that you may be overspending on a particular person. So you don't have to do anything with this tab, but as you put in your information, it's going to summarize for you. So all you have to do is put in the information, and I'm just going to put a name so that way you can see it automatically updates as you put in information in the tab. So this workbook is designed to be user-friendly. All you have to do is just put your information in, and it will do the rest for you. So for those of you who are registered, this is what you will be receiving, and your growth work assignment is to ensure that you account and determine what your contingency buffers are. So with that, that's all that I have for today's lesson. The recap will be going out relatively shortly, along with the updated workbook for those of you who are registered. If you have any questions or concerns, or if you have any questions related to the template, or if you need assistance with getting your information copied over, just feel free to send me the files that you already have, or give me access to the files that you already have, as well as this new one that you're going to get, and then I can update it for you on your behalf. So you all, I want to remind you that you can come back tomorrow for day 19. I want to also I'm not going to say that yet. Look out for the emails. Look out for the next announcement, and the recap emails will be going out to you all shortly. Thank you for your time, attention. Thank you for the moderators, Q Scott and Acacia, for being inside of the room tonight, as well as yesterday night as well. Thank you so much. And I want to remind you that your financial prosperity awaits you, and so does your financial sanity. You already know what I'm going to tell you to do, and that's what? Get to work. All right, guys.
The Debt Demolisher TV with Sophia Melone, the Debt